In the rivers, wetlands and streams of eastern Australia lives an ancient secret. Undescribed by Western scientists until the year 1800, and part of a reclusive order of mammals confined to just 5 species in modern times, it may also be the most unusual extant mammal on our planet. Semi-aquatic, with 4 flipper-like limbs, a beak that resembles that of a duck, a tail like a beaver's, and the ability to lay eggs. We're talking, of course, about the platypus. The platypus, despite its otherworldly appearance and lifestyle, is something of an icon of the animal kingdom. Recognizable by most, yet seen by few, the unique nature of this animal has seen it studied closely over the years by biologists and environmentalists alike. In today's video, we will be taking a look at this little oddity for ourselves to bring you all you need to know about the platypus, from the way it lives its life to its relationship with human beings. This is a journey that will take us across millions of years as we discover the platypus's prehistoric roots and find out exactly how it came to be in the rapidly changing world its ancestors survived. Sit back and relax as we take you to New South Wales, Tasmania, and beyond to understand the platypus in all its peculiarity and grace. The first thing to note about the platypus, the sole surviving member of the family Ornithohinchidae, is that nothing remotely like it lives in the animal kingdom today. It is one of 5 extant species of monotreme, the only mammals in the world that have retained their ancestral ability to lay eggs rather than give birth to live young. The only other animals in the order Monotremata are the echidnas, slow-moving, hedgehog-like mammals with long snouts, who are also native to Australia, as well as select reaches of Southeast Asia. While several animals related to the platypus are known from the fossil record, none of its immediate relatives have survived into the modern day, making the platypus something of an ancient relic amongst the mammals of the world. If you were to describe a platypus to someone who had never seen one, they would likely think you're making the animal up. Perfectly streamlined, with a coat of waterproof brown fur, these animals are suited to a life both in and out of the water and are adept at travelling across both. Alongside otters and chinchillas, it is one of the most densely furred mammals on the planet and is kept both insulated and dry by its overcoat of flattened guard hairs. Sometimes referred to as the duck-billed platypus on account of its unusual mouth, the animal's snout consists of a hairless, flattened beak with nostrils located on top. Tiny, beady eyes give the platypus a cute, but somewhat vacant expression, and rather than teeth, its mouth is lined with rows of hard pads that grind its food rather than chew it. 4 short yet powerful limbs help push the platypus through the water, with thick webbing between the digits that gives them a great degree of control in aquatic environments. On land, a platypus will actually fold up its feet and walk on its knuckles to make sure the webbing isn't damaged by rocks and other debris on the forest floor. At the back end of the body is a broad, flattened tail, similar to the one you might find on a beaver. People are often surprised at just how tiny platypuses are too. When fully grown, adults measure no longer than 50 centimeters or 20 inches and weigh only 1,700 grams, or 3.7 pounds. The oddities don't end there though. Platypuses glow in a rich turquoise color when exposed to ultraviolet light, which may be an adaptation to help it blend in against low-light surroundings when hiding from predators who use UV light to hunt. A platypus's bones are dense and hardened to reduce buoyancy, helping it remain under the water for extended periods of time. This way, they can spend more time searching for food along the bottom of rivers without having to expend much effort in remaining submerged, much like several aquatic species of reptile. In a similar manner, the monotremes are the only animals that have cloacas, openings towards their rears used both for reproductive purposes and the release of waste. Mother platypuses do not nurse their young in the traditional sense, but instead secrete milk from glands in their abdomen. The milk catches on the fur, which the babies are then able to lap up. The platypus is endemic to Australia, one of the last bastions of the monotremes on planet Earth. Its range runs along the eastern coastline of Australia, from halfway up the territory of Queensland in the north, heading south through New South Wales, across most of Victoria and all of Tasmania. They are rarely seen and are elusive in nature, preferring to inhabit remote freshwater streams and shallow rivers in rainforest or alpine areas. Occasionally, they can be seen in larger lakes or lagoon-like ponds in high-altitude regions. Part of what makes platypuses so hard to spot in the wild is their solitary lifestyle. They live alone for almost their entire lives, only coming together to mate during the breeding season. They are known to become aggressive to members of the same species when territories are breached. Each adult platypus will control a stretch of water that they will closely guard, with males becoming particularly aggressive when attempting to secure the right to mate each year. Out of the water, a platypus will make its home on a burrow, dug into the bank of the stretch of water it controls. They tend to spend half of their day in the water, searching for food, and half of it in the burrow, resting and digesting its catch. Typically, they are active in the water throughout the night and will sleep throughout the day, another factor contributing to their elusive reputation. While their beaks might look similar in form to those of dabbling ducks, platypuses are in fact strict carnivores and will feed on all manner of small-sized freshwater animals. Insect larvae and freshwater worms are most commonly taken, but those beaks are tough and are more than capable of tackling animals as hardy as crayfishes. They are opportunistic eaters and will often snap up fish eggs, tadpoles, and the variety of small mollusks and crustaceans that can be found along the bottom of Australian river systems. The rough plates on the inside of their beaks help them grind and crack their food open, allowing them to quickly snap up the softer parts of the animal. As platypuses obtain almost all of their food from underneath the water's surface, they need to be adept swimmers. Instead of using their tail to push themselves through the water like, say, a beaver, platypuses swim by, alternating the strokes of each forelimb. These limbs are strong, and they can easily control their position in the water using them. The hind limbs are used for the majority of the animal's steering, acting as a rudder in tandem with its flattened tail. Much like a freshwater diving duck, platypuses don't spend a lot of time under the water at once. They will dive in short bursts, averaging 35 seconds. They'll take short intervals of around 13 seconds to catch their breath at the surface before disappearing into the river once more to repeat the process. These animals have evolved an intricate network of senses to be able to find their food in low light conditions. The monotremes are the only mammals, with the exception of one species of dolphin, the Guiana dolphin, to use electroreception to find prey. In platypuses, this sense is extremely well developed and they rely almost entirely upon it to make a catch. While foraging on the riverbed, a platypus will shut its eyes, ears and nostrils and will probe the sediment and detritus on the floor using its bill. The bill is lined with 40,000 acute electroreceptors arranged in rows running from front to back. All living animals, especially those in the water, generate an electric field when they move, and these receptors help the platypus detect even the smallest activity that may otherwise have gone unnoticed. Unlike the electroreceptor systems found on a shark, which allow the fish to effectively see its prey's movements, a platypus will actually physically feel them. When hunting, the receptors are the animal's eyes, ears, nostrils, and hands, and are extremely effective at allowing the platypus to get its fill within a single night's work. From jerking their head erratically from left to right, they can get a strong sense of all movement in their peripheral. The only time platypuses can be found together is during mating, and this only happens seasonally. Platypus populations in the north of Australia tend to mate earlier than those living in the south, typically during the autumn and winter months where, in the southern hemisphere, it is warmest. Female platypuses mature and are ready to mate from the age of 2 and will remain fertile until around the age of 9. Generally, they can live for between 10 and 12 years in the wild. but certain animals in the care of humans have been able to reach over 20. The oldest individual on record died at the age of 24. Mating is often brief, which will see a suitable male grab the female's tail, then shoulder, with his bill while the pair breed. Platypuses, of course, are some of the only mammals that lay eggs, a feature retained from their early ancestors from the time of the dinosaurs. When doing so, the female will dig her way into a nesting burrow, which is much longer than a regular residential burrow, to lay her eggs. These nests can measure up to 30 meters or 98 feet long and will end with a simple chamber adorned with leaves and twigs. The female will construct this while she is pregnant to ensure the conditions are as warm and humid as possible for the youngsters when they hatch. 1 to 3 eggs will be laid, which will then hatch over a period of roughly 10 days. For the first few months of their lives, the baby platypuses will be confined to the burrow entirely as the female blocks the entrance off with soil. She will nurse her young with milk secreted into her fur until they are ready to leave, and around the 5-month mark, they will head into the water to learn the basics of survival. The infants develop quickly and don't spend long with their mothers. They are now ready for a life spent foraging, mating, sleeping, and protecting their territory from interlopers. Given their size, platypuses are not top predators in the environments in which they live, and are actually taken by a number of larger carnivores. Under the water, they need to be wary of eels, such as the large and powerful long-finned eel, which can make short work of a small platypus if it can grab one. Unsurprisingly, crocodiles also frequent the stretches of river they inhabit, and won't hesitate to snap up a platypus if they can. On land, platypuses find themselves in a dangerous world, where they can be much more vulnerable. Birds of prey may swoop down from the rainforest trees to snatch them in their talons, while terrestrial reptiles such as goannas will chase them through the undergrowth. Australia is particularly prone to high numbers of feral cats and dogs, and when these animals make their way into the forests and hills where platypuses make their home, the results can be disastrous on their populations. Sadly, platypuses also find themselves falling victim to an array of parasites which live in and around the water they inhabit. As they traverse streams and rivers, as well as the undergrowth, they often find themselves picking up an array of ticks, mites and fleas, which feed on the animal's blood and skin. Due to the platypus's diverse diet, it may also pick up internal parasites such as nematodes and flatworms, which can ravage the digestive system over time. In Tasmania, platypuses tend to become the hosts of the parasitic fungus Mucor amphibiorum, which can cause painful and visible lesions and ulcers across the animal's skin. If platypuses weren't odd enough, they also have a hidden trick up their sleeve. They are highly venomous. At the base of a male platypus's hind leg is a sharp, hollow spur, on the inside of which sits a venom gland that is often used in combat. The venom in question is made up of a series of defensin-like proteins made by the animal's weaponized immune system. While this venom is rarely used to protect themselves from predators, male platypuses will often attempt to stab one another with these spurs when they are fighting over territory, or the right to mate with a female. The venom won't kill a rival male, but is just potent enough that the opposition will be subdued. More often than not, the stab wound victim will leave the scene, allowing the victor to proceed with passing his genes onto the next generation. There are instances in the historical record of humans being stabbed by platypus spurs, which has resulted in excruciating pain. When stabbed on an arm or leg, the affected area will soon become swollen as fluid builds up in the limb. This can make the region much more sensitive to the pain that follows as the venom courses through the body and into the bloodstream. In extreme cases, the pain can last for months, but is not fatal in humans. The monotremes are the most ancient group of mammals that still have living representatives in modern times. While they are distantly related to other living mammal groups, Monotremes are a distinct evolutionary branch that split off from the lineages of marsupials and placental mammals over 160 million years ago. When the first monotremes appeared in the humid forests of ancient Earth, gigantic sauropod dinosaurs and fearsome theropod predators were the largest terrestrial animals on the planet. Though tiny and easy to overlook, the distant ancestors of the platypus were already well adapted to spending a life in the cover of the undergrowth, foraging for invertebrates, and learning to stay hidden in the presence of their dinosaur predators. Throughout the millions upon millions of years that followed then, monotremes continued to evolve alongside the groups of mammals that would one day become all-living marsupials and placentals. Basal traits such as egg-laying were retained in monotremes, as this is what helped them survive in these ancient forests. The reason they are so unusual compared with what we would consider to be typical modern mammals is because they split off from other species such a long time ago and have been evolving separately since then. Platypuses split off from the line of monotremes that would eventually become the echidnas, somewhere between 19 and 48 million years ago. The echidnas adapted to a life entirely spent on land, developing thick spines for protection against predators and long snouts to help them probe for their insect prey in forests and shrubland, while platypuses took the semi-aquatic route. Even before this split, you can clearly see a platypus's traits in animals such as Steropodon, a small monotreme that lived in Australia during the late Cretaceous period, 100 million years ago. In life, it was not as efficient in the water as modern platypuses are, and adopted many behaviors and adaptations seen in echidnas too. After the split, the platypus lineage starts to become much more familiar, and semi-aquatic carnivores such as Obdurodon enter the fossil record. Obdurodon is the most well-known extinct relative of the platypus, and lived between 28 to 5 million years ago between the Oligocene and Miocene epochs of the Cenozoic era. The dinosaurs had long since disappeared by this point, and mammals now ruled most of Earth's environments. Unlike modern platypuses, Obdurodon still had molar teeth, and may have hunted prey close to the surface of the water, rather than the riverbed. The modern platypus, Ornithorhynchus anatinus, enters the fossil record around 100,000 years ago, but the first members of the genus Ornithorhynchus appear in the Pliocene epoch, between 5.3 and 2.5 million years ago. Scientists aren't sure exactly why platypuses took the leap from being toothed predators that hunted in the water column to foragers of riverbeds, but they seem to have transitioned to this new way of hunting very recently. The change may have something to do with the arrival of the Recali, a semi-aquatic rodent, which arrived in Australia by way of New Guinea around 2.5 million years ago. The Recali was better adapted to hunting hard-bodied animals that creatures similar to Obdurodon relied upon, and the platypus was forced to adapt to hunting softer-bodied animals as a result. Soon they exchanged their molar teeth for rough dental pads, suited for grinding and cracking softer prey, and the platypus we know today was soon born. While Western scientists didn't describe the platypus until the 1800s, Aboriginal Australians were of course aware of the animal for millennia prior. They were in fact a sought-after food source for the first Australians, who hunted platypuses for their tails, which the animals store nutritious fats within. Not only did the Aboriginal Australians hunt platypuses, they also revered them in their Dreamtime stories. Platypuses appear in the myths and legends of Australian people that likely originated in ancient times, with some groups describing the animal as a hybrid between a water rat and a duck. Aboriginal communities with roots along the upper stretches of the Darling River in New South Wales tell the tale of a water rat by the name of Bigoon, who, while out foraging, happens across a stray duck who has wandered too far from home. Bigoon kidnaps the duck, holding her hostage in his home, but the duck eventually manages to escape. Bigoon is soon surprised to see that she returns to him and lays 2 eggs. These eggs hatch into the first platypuses, who are soon exiled from the region surrounding the river to the mountain streams in the south. Other Aboriginal tales tell of a great meeting of the animals of Australia, who all wished for the platypus to join their groups. Ultimately, the platypus decides it does not need to be a part of any group and remains friendly with all whilst living life at its own pace. Did Aboriginal Australians perhaps notice the unique traits reminiscent of mammals, birds and reptiles within platypuses, and tell these stories as a means of explaining what they were seeing? The second story in particular could also be a nod towards the platypus's solitary lifestyle and distinct place in the family tree of mammals. The people of Australia, both native and modern, hold the platypus as something of a cultural icon. The Wadi Wadi people of the Murray River in the southeast of the country protect platypuses, viewing them as totem animals that spiritually represent their clan members. These people strive to conserve the environments in which platypuses live and do not hunt them for food. Following the European colonization of Australia, the platypus's image continues to frequent books, toys, matchboxes, stamps, postcards and souvenirs from the regions of the country in which they live. Given their unique appearances and lifestyles, they are popular animals in modern culture, despite their enigmatic nature and difficulty to spot in the wild. While it was discovered by European explorers as early as 1606, Australia was colonised by the British Empire in 1788, after Captain James Cook claimed the landmass for the Crown on his travels in the South Pacific. While the local wildlife, such as kangaroos, emus, wombats and koalas became common knowledge quickly after the first flags were planted, the platypus remained elusive and did not enter the consciousness of European settlers until the year 1798. The discovery was sparked when Captain John Hunter, the Governor of New South Wales, sent a strange pelt and a sketch of an unknown animal to naturalists back in Britain. Hunter was likely disheartened when he learned that scientists back in Britain thought he had fabricated the encounter as a hoax. But can you really blame them? This supposed egg-laying mammal, with features reminiscent of beavers, water rats, ducks and aquatic reptiles, was unlike anything British explorers or naturalists had ever seen. How could they believe him? A year later, in 1799, George Shaw, a British naturalist and keeper of the British Museum, reviewed the pelt, cutting it with scissors as he expected to find evidence of stitching. When he found nothing, he started to change his mind. Maybe this really was a genuine animal. Shaw then published the first description of the platypus in Modern Science in his contribution to the journal Naturalist's Miscellany. He initially named the animal Platypus anatomos, with platypus meaning flat foot in Greek and anatomos meaning duck-like in Latin. It soon came to Shaw's attention, however, that the generic name platypus had already been given to a genus of wood-boring beetles, and due to naming conventions surrounding scientific classification, he had to change it. He instead picked Ornithohinchus anatomos, with Ornithohinchus meaning bird-like instead. The name platypus stuck though, and we now use it as the animal's common name. Despite the fact that they only became known to European settlers in 1798, platypuses sit on the edge of a knife when it comes to conservation. At the moment, the IUCN lists them as near threatened on the red list of species. They are not in imminent danger of extinction, but are potentially at risk if action is not taken in the near future. Since Europeans settled on Australia, platypus numbers have fallen by an estimated 30%, but this could be much higher. Upper estimates state that up to 50% of platypuses have died since the British arrived on the mainland. British settlers initially hunted the platypus not for its meat, but for its fur, which was crafted into clothing. As platypuses are particularly small, multiple animals were needed to make one article of clothing, and they became highly sought after due to the density of their coats. Thankfully, the loss in numbers was noted by authorities, and in 1890 the platypus became protected by law in Victoria and in the wider reaches of Australia by 1912. While it is illegal to trap and hunt a platypus in Australia today, this hasn't stopped the animal from falling victim to the nets of inland river fisheries. when fishermen cast nets into lakes and rivers with a view to catching yabbies. The mammals can become entangled in them, where they can drown if they can't escape quickly. This has led to the banning of certain styles of traps and nets to limit the chance of vulnerable species becoming ensnared as bycatchers, which will hopefully help platypuses prosper over time. Sadly, nets aren't the only threat to this enigmatic species. The expansion of humans into the more remote areas of Australia in which platypuses live have resulted in great disruption to populations. The construction of dams and reservoirs can cut off access to new territories within a platypus environment, and the ever-present threat of pollution looms in areas close to human habitation or industry. Polluted water can be carried into platypus environments as a result of urban runoff, where impervious surfaces such as roads prevent it from draining through. Land clearing and climate change has reduced the amount of available habitat that platypuses can thrive in, which can in turn lead to a reduction in food sources and the disruption and fragmentation of populations. Over the past 30 years, suitable habitat area for platypuses in Australia has dropped by about 22%, according to the Australian Conservation Foundation. The Murray-Darling Basin in particular seems to be affected badly, which has led to calls for the reassessment of the platypus as a near-threatened species, suggesting instead that it should be considered to be threatened. Captive breeding programs for platypuses are rare due to the solitary nature of the animals, and the lack of success sanctuaries and zoos have had in bringing animals together to mate. Still, however, efforts are ongoing to replicate the wild conditions a platypus might need to breed in captivity, and it is not unheard of for platypuses to reproduce under human care. In 1943, Healesville Sanctuary in Victoria became the first organisation to have bred platypuses, and due to the introduction of a tank that replicated the wild conditions of a stream in 1998, they saw even greater success, with new youngsters being raised to adulthood both in 1998 and 2000. This good fortune continued into the late 2000s and early 2000s, with multiple platypus babies having been safely raised to maturity at Healesville. Taronga Zoo in Sydney became the first public wildlife park to breed platypuses in 2003, with a set of twins, which were subsequently released into the rivers of New South Wales when they became able to fend for themselves. While several Australian zoos care for platypuses today, the only place to see them outside of the country is in California's San Diego Zoo Safari Park in the United States. It's truly amazing that monotremes are still among us, with only 4 extant species representing the 160 million years of evolution these mammals have endured. They really are living fossils. We are incredibly lucky to share the world with the platypus, such an unusual mammal that can almost give us an unparalleled peek into the prehistoric world it emerged from. Hopefully, with conservation efforts and captive breeding programs, we can soon see platypuses returning to least concern on the IUCN's red list of species. It would be a huge shame to lose them now.